Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Brendan O'Hearn, and I have the honor of guiding us over the next 2 days of the conference. Welcome to the WCO's second Global Conference on Cross-Border E-Commerce, hosted by the World Customs Organization here in Brussels, Belgium, with the generous financial support of the Customs Cooperation Fund of Japan. Thank you, Japan Customs. This second WCO Global Conference on Cross-Border E-Commerce follows the one held in Beijing in 2018. The theme for this conference is Customs United Effort on Recovery, Renewal, and Resilience for a Sustainable E-Commerce Supply Chain. Considering the benefits of full implementation of the WCO e-commerce framework of standards and the e-commerce package, this conference will discuss resilience and innovation of customs procedures under COVID-19, with the use of data and advanced technologies for e-commerce supply chain continuity. Over the next 2 days, we will host over 25 high-level speakers from all corners of the globe in 6 different sessions. The event will stimulate a high-level strategic dialogue towards fostering innovative and inclusive partnerships with e-commerce stakeholders for a secure, sustainable, and resilient cross-border e-commerce environment. One of our speakers today will even challenge us to stretch not only our minds, but our bodies as well, so be sure to stay tuned. Turning towards some of the administrative arrangements for the conference will be conducted in English and French with simultaneous interpretation. You can choose the language channel at the bottom of your screen. Participants are encouraged to ask questions using the chat tab of the Zoom platform. These questions will be monitored by our staff here in Brussels and forwarded to the moderators of each session. Presentations will be shared via the event website after the conference. The speakers' bios are available on the conference website for your reference. The conference will be recorded, and we are working on the necessary arrangements to be able to share the recordings with you through the WCO's YouTube channel. Joining us while on mission from my home state of New York, I would now like to invite our Secretary General, Dr. Kunio MIKURIYA, to officially open the conference. Secretary General, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brendan, for your introduction. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, actually, I'm in New York to attend several United Nations meetings. Just before that meeting, really, it is a great pleasure and honor to welcome you today to WCO's second global conference on cross-border e-commerce, which is held with the support of the Customs Cooperation Fund of Japan. More than 1,700 representatives have registered for today's conference, demonstrating the keen public interest in the e-commerce issue. Last week, the WCO Council addressed the current priority that is contributing to the global efforts for recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. In this connection, members observed that the COVID-19 pandemic had further accelerated the surge of e-commerce, and this trend would continue even in the post-COVID-19 era. Indeed, e-commerce has played a significant role to sustain the continuity of economies in the emerging situation. This is why the conference is themed as Customs United Efforts on Recovery, Renewal, and Resilience for a Sustainable Supply Chain. The first global conference on cross-border e-commerce was held in February 2018 in Beijing, China. The first conference shared the principles of cross-border e-commerce, included in the draft framework of standards on cross-border e-commerce, with a wide range of stakeholders for consultation. And subsequently, the WCO Council adopted the framework of standards in June 2018 and finalized the 3 remaining annexes on dataset, partnership with the private sector, and revenue collection in December 2020. Therefore, it is opportune to organize the second conference to share experiences as the framework has entered into the full implementation period. The rapid progress of e-commerce has changed the consumer behavior, but also enlarged customs focus from mainly managing large maritime containers to handling large numbers of small and low-value cargo delivery by air. However, it is not only the size and the price which have affected customs procedures. New business models and the characteristic of e-commerce have presented a number of challenges that could affect the basic principles of traditional customs procedures. First, at the importer side, customs procedures have developed based on B2B, business-to-business trade, where customs could get commercial data from known enterprises for the risk management purpose. On the other hand, e-commerce is more focused on B2C, business-to-consumer trade, where importers are often individual consumers with less information and knowledge of customs procedures. Accordingly, customs could no more solely rely on importer-based procedures to get necessary data to evaluate admissibility of parcels. Second, at the exporter side, the e-commerce provides opportunities for micro, small, and medium-sized or MSMEs vendors, including those from developing countries, to participate in international trade. However, it gives a challenge for customs to build a direct relationship with those MSMEs as exporters. It has therefore become vital for customs to build a cooperative relationship with intermediaries, including e-marketplaces, which connect consumers and MSMEs vendors to get necessary trade data. Third, with its time-sensitive nature, e-commerce is characterized by a high-level utilization of information and technologies for advanced logistics, in particular by new business models such as fulfillment centers. Fulfillment centers gather information and parcels in one place and ensure just last-mile delivery logistics to deliver the packages as quickly and accurately as possible. However, this business model casts a very basic question on the definition of importers, exporters, and customs value. On the other hand, this business model could provide an opportunity for customs to utilize such information and technologies. Fourth, the recent global operation coordinated by the WCO on COVID-19 related goods revealed that small packages facilitated by online trade became the preferred channel of illicit trade that pose health, safety, and security risks to citizens. As a result of operations, customs around the world seized millions of fake medicines and medical supplies. We are now focused to facilitate the movement of vaccines while avoiding counterfeit vaccines entering in market. Fifth and lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced customs to further digitalize any remaining paper-based procedures and actively use data analytics for better targeting for e-commerce as customs receive a huge number of data, including advanced electronic data and non-intrusive inspection images. The framework of standards on cross-border e-commerce offers 50 standards that broadly cover all of the issues I just mentioned, which was developed as a result of intensive and futuristic discussions, not only among customs, but also with the e-commerce stakeholders and relevant international organizations. Today and tomorrow, we'll learn about a variety of initiatives and experiences related to the implementation of the framework from distinguished speakers from customs, international organizations, e-commerce stakeholders, as well as solution vendors. In particular, We will hear how members have been implementing and piloting the use of advanced electronic data and advanced technologies and strengthening cooperation with the e-commerce stakeholders, utilizing the concept of authorized economic operators. We will also learn how revenue collection models would contribute to the effective use of resources for many administrations to manage growing e-commerce trade. Let us think out of the box as we have started the review cycle of the framework to keep our standards relevant. Your valuable contribution to this online conference will support customs and business in considering the future of custom procedures and cross-border e-commerce in order to support the recovery of supply chain in a resilient and sustainable manner. I wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. Next, I would like to invite Mr. John Denton, Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, to provide some opening remarks. Secretary General Denton, please.
Thank you much, Mr. Chair, and it's great to be with you all. It's good to see you in Kunio in New York City. I was just asking my office to work out how I can get there and back. It's a very exciting opportunity, so I'm now fully vaccinated. It's truly a great honor to have the opportunity to join with you all today, and it's a wonderful opportunity for the ICC. We view our relationship with the World Customs Organization as being of paramount importance to delivering on our vision of making business work for everyone, every day, everywhere. As I recently mentioned to the Secretary General, with whom I'm delighted to share the stage today, we are deeply committed to elevating our constructive engagement with the World Customs Organization across a range of areas. And I do hope that my involvement in today's conference represents the start of a new chapter in our institutional relationship. I believe we owe it to our respective stakeholders to do all we can to maximize the benefits of cross-border commerce for the businesses, workers, and families looking for relief in the wake of COVID-19. Governments and business need to meet the challenge together. And I can tell you, the International Chamber of Commerce is committed to working hand in hand with the World Customs Organization. I want to start by placing my speech today in the context of what we see happening more broadly in the global trading system. In my view, the rapid digitalization presaged by the COVID-19 pandemic means that it's highly likely that we won't actually be talking about e-commerce in 2030, maybe not even by 2025. That's to say, we may not even be talking about digital trade. Finally, we might just be talking about trade with all its various complexions. That's what we would like to see. Because the lines between cross-border transactions conducted between electronic platforms and through more traditional means have already become so blurred that differentiating between the two feels highly artificial. Ultimately, what we all need to prepare for, and this will be the core theme of my discussion today, is a fully digitally enabled trading system. My commitment when I took on the role of Secretary General of the ICC was to take trade from analog to digital. In other words, we want to develop an ecosystem that can finally deliver on the promise of digital technologies to fully democratize access to trade, and moreover, capitalize on the potential economic and social gains that this will bring. One thing that is immensely promising in this regard is the remarkable steps that we've seen you, customs agencies, make to ensure and secure cross-border trade in the face of the unprecedented shock created by COVID-19. From an economic perspective, you are actually the true heroes of the pandemic, keeping trading goods flowing at a time when so many so-called experts said that global commerce would likely grind to a halt. It did not. But it's vital that we don't lose the gains that we made through the course of this pandemic and through the course of your application of emergency actions. In short, what's good for the pandemic will be essential in an era defined by the adoption of digital technologies at scale. To this end, we urge all agencies to make permanent the temporary COVID facilitations that they implemented at the border in recent months, from advanced electronic information systems to paperless trade processes. Despite what the famous Hollywood movie may suggest, there can be no going back if we want to move forward to the future. Back to the future is not the way forward. We must move forward together. On that note, I want to emphasize the vital importance that the global business community places, after 2 decades of too much talk, on finally ridding the global trading system of the scourge of paper documents, what we actually call paralysis by paper. We've seen some progress on this front in recent months, but frankly, it's not enough. To put this in context, digital transformation has occurred at a staggering pace in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we have not seen comparable digitization in international merchandise trade. By way of example, while US e-commerce saw user growth of around 40% last year, 99.9%, that's right, 99.9% of key trade documents, such as bills of lading, remain in paper format. There is much work to be done to scale technical frameworks and customs infrastructure to increase this number to something respectable. That's what we must do, because we must invest in digital customs systems, electronic single window facilities, and e-port management systems. But perhaps surprisingly, the greatest enabler of digital negotiable instruments is actually legislative reform. Antiquated legal frameworks which were designed for paper-based trade too often hold back adoption of digital trade solutions. With most jurisdictions requiring negotiable instruments to be presented in paper form, traders are forced to rely on cumbersome and costly paper-based processes, the paralysis by paper I referred to before. Indeed, outdated laws render global trade immune to the rapid digitization affected by the pandemic, and that's one type of immunity that we cannot afford to see as everlasting, which is why we are calling on all governments to create an enabling legal environment for the use of electronic trade documents, most fundamentally by adopting the UNCITRAL model law on electronic transferable records, or MILITA as it's known. ICC, my organization, is at the forefront of advocacy to create this enabling legal environment. Partnering with UNCITRAL, we facilitated stakeholder engagement in several jurisdictions around the world and championed MILITA reform in the WTO, just as recently as last week, in the G7 and with the G20. Last month, we were delighted to see G7 economies agree to the language that we proposed and agree to a new framework for collaboration on electronic transferable records, which champions the MILITA, because they recognize that it is a fit-for-purpose solution in the creation of an enabling legal environment for paperless trade. As ICC, our commitment to the creation of enabling regulation with respect to negotiable instruments spans more than a century. At its very first Congress, held in London in 1921, we, the ICC, asked delegations to gauge reactions from their respective governments to a proposal to revitalize the Hague Conventions in the pursuit of unification of laws on bills of exchange and promissory notes. ICC was decisive then in creating the political will for the 1931 Geneva Conference, which resulted in the convention providing a uniform law for bills of exchange and promissory notes. And almost a century later, we are united once again in the push for an enabling legal environment for the digitization of these instruments. Back then, the vision was to unify the approaches to negotiable instruments in Roman Dutch law and in Anglo-American common law. We now recognize that the proper goal of our efforts is not unification, but rather harmonization, recognizing the sovereign prerogatives of nation states to draft their own substantive law. The commercial value of consistent regulation across countries still holds, and the focus has now shifted to the pursuit of harmonization of laws that will enable the use of electronic transferable records. In conclusion, we urge you all to do what you can with your respective capitals to drive adoption of MILITA consistent laws to consign the burden paper documents place on the global trading system to the dustbin of history. There can be no talk of building back better from the pandemic unless this actually happens. Friends, we understand that the transition to a fully digitalized system for merchandise trade comes with many complexities, but we believe the best way to approach these necessary reforms is to actually think small in the design of the necessary reforms. Micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MISMEs, are increasingly able to find new customers and markets thanks to e-commerce platforms. But to realize the potential of a truly global marketplace, they also need to understand and navigate often complex customs and border requirements to get their goods abroad or to bring in inputs that they need to produce their goods. In short, the red tape in customs and border controls can still choke off business opportunities, even in today's high-tech world. Common sense reforms make all the difference. And make no mistake, business is ready to assist where we can. ICC is playing its role in supporting small businesses, pursuing e-commerce opportunities as part of our leadership role in the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, whose mission is to make trade simpler, faster, and less costly. We're doing that in our creation of centers of entrepreneurship on a global basis. We're doing that in how we're achieving the Digital Standards Initiative, which we based out of Singapore, and in which we welcome the collaboration of the World Customs Organization. We are doing our bit because we know, as the Secretary General said earlier, that it's in the heart of the global economy, which can only be strong if MSMEs and SMEs are able to function effectively. And part of that is enabling them more easily to trade across borders. Finally, I want to mention what is perhaps the most concerning of all issues at the confluence between digital world and customs practices. As customs agencies improve their digital capabilities, some may even suggest a newfound ability to impose duties on electronic transmissions. Now, leaving aside the very real question, the practicability of such an intervention, the debate on the role of customs agencies here is a classic case of just because you can doesn't mean you should. The World Trade Organization moratorium on customs duties on electronic transmissions has become an indispensable aspect of the modern trading system. As a central piece in the 70+ year long-term trend towards an international trading system as free as possible from barriers to the global exchange of goods and services. Not only has it been renewed at every ministerial conference since 1998, but some 90 jurisdictions have now signed regional trade agreements that include a provision stating the permanency of the moratorium. In the intervening 20 years since the moratorium was proposed, it has enabled digital trade to flourish, helped consumers access new products and services, and empowered businesses, in particular MSMEs, to access new markets. In short, it enabled the digital ecosystems that allowed countless MSMEs to remain afloat throughout the pandemic. Consider for a moment the millions of workers and their families whose livelihoods were safeguarded by the digital economy in 2020 and this year. Our emphatic view, and what we have consistently advocated, is that the moratorium should be made permanent. We can't let customs duties break the internet. We call on you to lend your full support to achieving a permanent prohibition to the applications of customs duties at this November's World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference. And we thank you for your support for that. My thanks again for the invitation today. My message is really that the digitally enabled commerce is the future. Digitally enabled commerce is the future of trade. Let's drop the E and get to work on configuring the ecosystems needed to make 21st century trade work for everyone, every day, everywhere. Together we can deliver on the promise of a digitalized trading system that generally and genuinely drives inclusion and creates opportunity for all. I hope you can see, and I hope you understand, that the ICC can be and will be and is your partner of choice on this journey. I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I thank you for the opportunity to continue to collaborate with the WCO, and I wish you the best wishes for the next period of time in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General Denton. We greatly appreciate your visionary, inspiring, and challenging remarks. In our next session, we will host 3 distinguished speakers representing customs administrations on 3 different continents. They will discuss the benefits of full implementation of the WCO e-commerce package, customs measures under COVID-19 for e-commerce supply chain continuity, and new opportunities for fostering partnerships with e-commerce stakeholders. Please join me in welcoming WCO Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Ricardo TREVIñO, to provide a scene setter and to moderate the roundtable on customs perspectives on e-commerce during the COVID-19 crisis and resilience for the e-commerce supply chain. Deputy Secretary General, please.
Thank you, Brendan, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this second session of the WCO Second Global Conference on Cross-Border E-Commerce. After noting our opening remarks from Secretary General Kunio MIKURIYA and Secretary General Denton, I think we have a good scene to start already discussing some of the specifics and some of the challenges that we might find ahead of us. This session is devoted exactly to the customs perspective on e-commerce during the COVID-19 crisis and resilience of the e-commerce supply chain. In the next 75 minutes, we will have a roundtable discussion with distinguished speakers from the United States Customs and Border Protection, from the Directorate General for Taxation and Customs Union of the European Commission, and from China Customs. I welcome our speakers, and I will introduce them just in a few minutes. I would like to set the scene for our discussion by outlining the benefits of full implementation of the WCO e-commerce framework of standards and the supporting tools, with a special focus on the role of e-commerce during the COVID-19 pandemic. We are all aware of the enormous economic growth opportunities presented by e-commerce, especially for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. At the same time, cross-border e-commerce, in particular business-to-consumer, B2C, and consumer-to-consumer, C2C, transactions is presenting a number of new challenges and opportunities to governments. This fast-evolving trade environment and the growing number of small packages that was overwhelming customs already before the pandemic required comprehensive and well-considered solutions from all stakeholders, including, of course, customs authorities. The WCO identified the need to develop global standards for effective management of cross-border e-commerce, as we consider that the lack of such global standards had an impact on trade facilitation, safety, and security, and of course compliance. Therefore, global standards are essential in better leveraging this new channel of trade as a new engine of global economic growth. Thus, in 2016, the WCO started in-depth discussions in the area of cross-border e-commerce with the objective of developing collaborative solutions supporting the needs and expectations of all stakeholders in the e-commerce supply chain in the context of the growing volumes of cross-border B2C and C2C e-commerce shipments and the associated border risks. The WCO e-commerce framework of standards was developed by a multi-stakeholder working group on e-commerce and was adopted by the WCO Council in June 2018. The framework of standards is based in 8 key principles. They are advanced electronic data and risk management, facilitation and simplification, fair and efficient revenue collection, safety and security, partnerships, public awareness, outreach and capacity building, measurement and analysis, and leveraging with transformative technologies. In the framework of these 8 key principles, the e-commerce framework of standards provides 15 baseline global standards. These standards have a focus on the exchange of advanced electronic data for effective risk management and enhanced facilitation of the growing volumes of cross-border, small and low-value B2C and C2C shipments. This should be done through simplified procedures with respect to areas such as clearance, revenue collection, and in close partnership with e-commerce stakeholders. The framework of standards also encourages the use of the authorized economic operator, the AEO concept. Also, non-intrusive inspection equipment, data analytics, and other cutting-edge technologies to support safe, secure, and sustainable cross-border e-commerce. The tools supporting the implementation of the e-commerce framework of standards and forming part of the e-commerce package were adopted by the Council in June 2019 and December 2020. These include technical specifications to the framework of standards, definitions, e-commerce business models, e-commerce flowcharts, including a return flowchart, reference data sets for cross-border e-commerce, and documents describing the possible revenue collection approaches and the roles and responsibilities of the e-commerce stakeholders. Also an implementation strategy, an action plan, and capacity building mechanism, together with key performance indicators for the 15 standards of the e-commerce framework, and a compendium of case studies on e-commerce that it's aimed to be updated in an annual basis. In addition to that, The Secretariat developed topic-specific Secretariat notes with the objective of providing practical guidance to members on expanding the AEO concept to cross-border e-commerce and on effective and efficient revenue collection in cross-border e-commerce. I would like to also highlight the update and maintenance mechanism that is in place in order to ensure that the e-commerce package continues to be relevant to the dynamically evolving e-commerce environment. It should be acknowledged that members are implementing the e-commerce framework of standards in a phased manner based on their national priorities, specificities, internal procedures, and of course, resource availability. Capacity building support in this process is also of key importance. After finalizing the tools forming part of the e-commerce package, we directed our focus towards providing capacity building support to members to implement the e-commerce framework of standards in a coordinated and harmonized manner. We have established a pool of WCO accredited experts, technical and operational advisors on e-commerce, and we are in the process of delivering, with the help of these experts, a series of regional workshops on e-commerce. Already 4 of these regional workshops have been carried out, and the rest will follow. During the crisis brought by the COVID-19 pandemic, e-commerce has proved to be a lifeline for vendors and buyers alike. In the context of the emergency measures needed to curb the spread of the disease, such as travel restrictions, stay-at-home orders, lockdowns, closures of non-essential businesses, many brick-and-mortar businesses quickly adapted and moved into e-commerce. This saved their economic activity and demonstrated also the power that e-commerce has. On the other hand, the use of the e-commerce channel helped consumers observe the social distancing requirements imposed by health authorities worldwide. As a result, the volume of small packages crossing borders grew exponentially. Now, to this aspect, regarding some statistics, according to the Global Express Association, between February and June 2020, the number of international non-document shipments grew from 19 million per month to 29 million per month. That is by more than 50% over this 4-month period. The WCO has also responded effectively to the COVID-19 pandemic, and our response has been centered around 3 pillars: communication and sharing of information, including, of course, the development of guidance materials and the coordination of enforcement activities. Second, partnerships. And thirdly, capacity building. With regard to the guidance materials, I would like to mention the WCO guidelines on disaster management and supply chain continuity that were endorsed by the Council just last week. The Customs Risk Management during a Pandemic document, the Secretariat note on what customs can do to mitigate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the HS classification references that were extensively used by our members and also by business for prioritization purposes. The WCO guidance on supporting the economy and sustaining supply chain continuity in response to the pandemic is relevant to the e-commerce environment as well. But what is of key importance is the efficient and harmonized implementation of the e-commerce package by our members. Here, I would like to specifically mention the standards dealing with advanced electronic data for risk management, use of advanced technologies to keep physical interventions to the absolute minimum, introduction of electronic payment options for the payment of customs duties and taxes, and the standards on facilitation and simplification. We share the opinion that trade facilitation and a truly paperless customs environment will constitute a critical building block for further growth of e-commerce. Now, we have time now to really delve into these matters with our distinguished speakers. I will now introduce them, and we have our speakers, the Acting Executive Assistant Commissioner from the Office of Trade, from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Mr. John LEONARD. Welcome, John. We have as well Ms. Sabine Hensler, Director for International and General Affairs, Directorate General for Taxation and Customs Union, DigiTaxud, of the European Commission. Hi, Sabine, and welcome. And of course, we have as well Ms. Lan Hu, Deputy Director General, Department of International Cooperation from the General Administration of Customs in China. Hello, Ms. Lan Hu, and welcome as well to this second Global Conference on E-commerce. We're going to start with 3 rounds of questions, and from there, we will, of course, open the floor for additional questions from our audience. So I will make a first question for all 3 speakers, and we will start maybe by having the word first from ladies first. So I would provide the floor first to Sabine, then to Lan Hu, and finally, John, you would make us the honor. So my first question here, and welcome again to this second session, would be a little bit in the purpose to set the scene, and not only for this session, but for the other conference sessions. Could you please briefly explain the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on e-commerce as experienced by your respective administrations? We would like to hear a bit more about the impacts in terms of volumes of e-commerce parcels, reforms, impact of the travel restrictions on capacities, impacts of the lockdowns and curfews, and on last mile deliveries. Sabine, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Ricardo, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all participants across the world, and good morning, good afternoon to my fellow panelists in this panel. Maybe, Ricardo, I would like to address your question in a more broader sense, and I would like also to thank you for inviting me to this second Global E-commerce Conference. A long time seems to have passed since the first global conference that I had the pleasure to attend in Beijing in 2018. And back then, we were actually busy finalizing the e-commerce framework of standards, which was endorsed in mid-2018. And we also had the WCO e-commerce package at the end of 2020. And the EU has collaborated and contributed very closely to the work of the WCO in these matters. As you said, and as also the Secretary General and Secretary General Denton said, between these conferences, the world, as we know, has been unsettled by the unprecedented pandemic, which has brought the challenges to customs staff and trade professionals to keep trade flowing across the borders. I think we can see all over the globe that the pandemic has led to an even faster increase in the volumes of cross-border e-commerce shipments and has accelerated digital transformation. These trends, I think, are likely to continue, and in the EU, we are working very intensely on our answer to that. Now, let me just say a bit more about the increase. You asked about the numbers, the increase in the volume of small parcels. I think what we don't have very reliable or very precise figures, but what we have seen is that if we compare it to the traditional trade, we see that traditional trade approximately 300 million import declarations, so 300 million consignments in 2019, whereas we estimate the parcels, the imports of parcels into the EU at 2 billion parcels. So 300 million traditional shipments, 2 billion in e-commerce goods. Now, if we look into value, we see probably just the opposite trend, because we see that the traditional trade imports reached probably a peak in 2019 with about 2 trillion imports, 2 trillion euros in import value, whereas we saw that probably the same value for the e-commerce goods was at around 300 billion. So we are talking here about that e-commerce is about 1/6 of the number of transactions in terms of value. Now, this means that traditional customs approaches have reached their limits. I think we can all agree on that. And we have also seen actors who are using this situation, the sheer volume of trade, for trafficking with non-compliant or counterfeit products that raise safety and security threats to the citizens and to public health, and also for systematic under-evaluation in order to avoid VAT and customs duties. So VAT for us in the European Union is collected at import. In order to address these challenges, the EU has worked on a number of initiatives to allow customs, first, to ensure the safety and security of its citizens, and second, to collect import revenues while facilitating the compliance by consumers and facilitating legitimate trade. Deputy Secretary General, you mentioned one of the principles of the framework on e-commerce is, of course, the advance information, and is also fair revenue collection. I'll say a bit more about it in a second. So these initiatives that we have adopted at the EU level follow the principles of the WCO e-commerce package, and we see them as best practices for its implementation. Let me just highlight two initiatives that we have adopted and that have either recently entered into force or that will enter into force shortly. The first one relates indeed to the advanced data requirements for safety and security purposes in small consignments. And here on the 15th of March, we have proceeded with the first phase of our import control system, which improves our risk management and our information systems to ensure the safety and security of e-commerce imports. This first phase introduces new reporting requirements for postal shipments, in addition to the existing reporting requirements for express operators, and that means that advanced electronic data has to be submitted by postal operators. All goods, as of the 15th of March, all goods in postal and express that are destined to the EU are subject to customs security and safety risk assessment prior to their arrival. In the next phase of the import control system, we will extend the reporting obligations to other modes of transport, first to air freight from 2023 onwards, and then to sea, road, and rail from 2024 onwards. That is the first part that we have adopted in terms of advanced electronic information. And the second one, Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General, you mentioned also the issue about fair revenue collection. And here we have acted with a package around VAT rules. On the 1st of July, so that is in 2 days, the EU will abolish its current VAT de minimis threshold, that is up to 22 euros for imports into the EU. That means that from that moment on, goods imported into the EU will be subject to VAT, and all goods have to be accompanied by a customs declaration independently of the value. Now, in order to simplify the declaration and the payment of VAT, a new scheme for distance sales of business to consumer low-value goods has been established. We call it the Import One-Stop Shop, and that is an Import One-Stop Shop where online sellers, including online marketplaces and platforms, can register in a member state for the declaration and payment of VAT on distance sales of goods to consumers within the EU. With these measures, we hope to restore an equal treatment between the domestic sales and the imports of the same goods, and also between e-commerce and traditional shops, because while e-commerce has helped to keep trade flows growing, but we also see that it has had a very significant consequence on traditional retail business. And at the same time, we also hope that with these new rules, we can cut down on the abuse of the current VAT de minimis threshold, which costs EU treasuries about 7 billion euros a year. So our efforts will not stop there. We are working on a number of other initiatives to access information related to e-commerce transactions. As I said, these are phenomena that they will not go away, they will stay with us. And so we are currently exploring the data exchange between customs and e-commerce platforms regarding authentic trade data that cannot be captured by other actors, but which could enhance the risk management. Pilot testing between the EU member states and platforms is expected to start later in 2021. And the outcomes of this exercise will help us to shape our customs legislation in the future to make it fit to better deal with e-commerce. In addition, the EU is also working on ensuring direct access by customs to relevant tax information and to payment information about e-commerce transactions. We are in parallel also building up data analytics capability at EU level with a view to supplement and to complement the member states' risk analysis. And we are using technological solutions to facilitate and control the e-commerce supply chain. And last but not least, I would like to highlight the importance of cooperating with the business stakeholders, our international partners, and at multilateral level to look for practical solutions to improve customs efficiencies in order to address the challenges of e-commerce. We think the WCO framework of standards for e-commerce and the WCO e-commerce package have been a global game changer in this endeavor. They promote global standards and harmonization of e-commerce rules and provide guidance, tools, and best practices for implementation. We have tried to take the first steps, and we remain committed to continue our close cooperation with the WCO and with our partners around the globe. Thank you, Deputy Secretary General.
Thank you, Sabine, for this very comprehensive answer. I think it's quite positive, all the initiatives that we've been hearing, and I'm sure we will have more opportunity to listen a bit more in depth about what the EU is doing on this. Now I'll give the floor to Lan Hu from China Customs, so that we can know a little bit more of how China is facing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Secretary General, for the invitation to this very important meeting. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be with you tonight for this second global conference on cross-border e-commerce. The first global conference on e-commerce is still fresh in my mind, so we are very pleased that the WCO take the initiative forward. Regarding the question posed just now by the Deputy Secretary General, cross-border e-commerce has played a very crucial role in boosting economic recovery and restoring people's normal life during this difficult time of the pandemic. However, the heavy blow of the pandemic also put very severe strains on cross-border e-commerce in such areas as, I think, for example, the cash flow, the supply chain, the shortage of commodity, and also the difficulty of logistics. For China Customs, to help the industry to tackle the difficulties, we have taken a series of measures. For limitation of the time, I taken this opportunity, I only share part of some of the measures with you, focusing on the policies we've taken to overcome the impact brought by the pandemic. First, we expand unimpeded cross-border e-commerce logistic channels and facilitate clearance of anti-epidemic goods. We make full usage of rail freight service, such as China-Europe Railway Express, to overcome the impact of the limited international flights. I have a statistics here. In 2020, China-Europe Railway Express ran 12,400 freight services and carried 1.135 million TEUs, an increase of 56% year on year. Apart from that, we also opened temporary ports of exit and ports of entry to expedite clearance and also set up 24-hour green lanes for the clearance of anti-epidemic materials. We also provide targeted facilitation measures, including simplification of declaration and also prioritize inspection for SMEs, give them a strong support in cross-border e-commerce effort in the global combat against COVID-19. And second, we simplify our control for the return of cross-border e-commerce goods. As we are all aware, easy to buy but difficult to return is an outstanding issue impeding the development of cross-border e-commerce. So in 2020, China Customs formulated specific measures targeting the problem. For example, for exports, the goods returned can be taken back to China within 1 year after release, either individually or in batches. This is more in line with the fragmented nature of the cross-border e-commerce. And also for imports, the time of return is time limited is extended from 30 days to 45 days. This meets this overcome the difficulty of the delay of delivery caused by the pandemic. And also, all the goods in the declaration can be returned or part of it returned. And also, for at the same time, the cross-border e-commerce enterprises and their domestic agents are held responsible to ensure that the goods returned are the ones that sold. So in this, we try to, by shared responsibility, we try to strike a balance between facilitation and security. With China's quick control of quick control of the pandemic, and the full resumption of work and production, and also supported by policies and relative policies and measures, China's cross-border e-commerce has recovered rapidly. I have a set of statistics here I would like to share with you. In 2019, the annual import and export volume of China's cross-border e-commerce was $200 billion. In 2020, the annual volume hit $261.6 billion, an increase of 31.1% over the previous year. So, Secretary General, that's generally what I share with the colleagues for this first question. Thank you.
Thank you, Lan Hu, for these great inputs and impressive numbers that you have just shared. Before turning the floor to John Leonard from CBP, I would like also to remind participants that the chat is available for any questions or remarks that you might want to raise. So now the floor is for John. Thank you, John. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Ricardo, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and nice to see Sabine and Lan, my co-panelists. So the pandemic certainly was a very busy year for Customs and Border Protection here in the United States on many fronts, especially on e-commerce. So the numbers of small packages had been growing really ever since the e-commerce revolution began, well over 10 years ago, year by year. And the pandemic only increased it. And so, currently we are seeing in the United States 2 million small parcels coming in per day. You do the math on that, for 365 days a year, it's well over 700 million small parcels coming in. Of course, in addition to all our regular, larger, normal shipments that are arriving. And it's not just air. A lot of the shipments do come via that method, either on air cargo, express consignment or international mail. But we're starting to see more and more small packages coming in through maritime vessel method, as well as cross-border on trucks for the United States would be from Canada and Mexico. So it's interesting. It's not just a phenomenon for air for the United States. So we've been working to really get more information on incoming small packages. In a later question, I'll talk a little bit more about the pilots that we've been running, actually starting before the pandemic, which was very good timing on our part. But we haven't been getting good information on these small parcels. And just for definition's sake, in the United States, we define that as a under $800 USD. That is our de minimis level, which is actually quite high. But that's how we define a quote unquote small parcel or small package, de minimis shipment, if you will. One thing that was very apparent during the pandemic, and Secretary General MIKURIYA had mentioned it in his remarks, a lot of counterfeit and unsafe items started to come in the area of personal protective equipment. So we know counterfeiters worldwide, as soon as a trend happens and there's a way to make money, they jump on it immediately. And this was very true in the pandemic. So Customs and Border Protection up through February of this year, since the beginning of the pandemic, right? So just a little under a year's time, say March of 2020 to February of 2021, we seized over 30 million counterfeit N95 masks. 30 million. Those are the trademark masks from the 3M company. We seized over 180,000 Food and Drug Administration prohibited COVID test kits. So these are fake test kits that don't work. We seized over 37,000 Environmental Protection Agency prohibited antivirus lanyards. These are completely bogus items that you wear around your neck, and it's supposed to somehow ward off the virus. We've seized over 38,000 Food and Drug Administration prohibited chloroquine tablets, 6,000 tablets of antibiotics, and over 30,000 containers of counterfeit hand sanitizer. So, along with the influx of legitimate personal protective equipment, which of course we expedited more at the beginning of the pandemic, there was also this rise of counterfeit, unsafe, and fake goods as well. So it really has been an evolution, but the main constant has been just a rise in numbers of small packages. We're seeing that this is not going away. As Mr. Denton had mentioned, it's just becoming the norm now for online platforms to be facilitating international trade. They are a very powerful actor in our world now, where prior we had been used to just dealing with normal importers and exporters. Now we have the platforms with great influence. So that's the kind of a wrap up of what Customs and Border Protection has seen during the pandemic, and I'll turn it back over to you, Ricardo.
Thank you, John, for your great inputs. Indeed, volume of e-commerce keeps growing. This is the trend, not only before the pandemic, but now I would say for many this would be basically a new traditional way. It's quickly becoming a new traditional way of doing trade, and it's here to stay, as you just said. So thanks again for your inputs. I see now there is a bit more movement in the chat, so I'll take some of the questions there in a minute. But I'll go first for another set of questions that I would like for three speakers to respond. This time, maybe we can start with Lan Hu, this second round, and the question goes a little bit on the experience of the three of you. You have, of course, great experience both on export and import of e-commerce shipments. These are big economies that are already trading a lot of cross-border e-commerce. And what would be your advice to other members that are still now experiencing a surge of e-commerce, but have not yet regulated this matter, and also in the part of submission of advanced electronic data, the simplified procedures, and revenue collection? A piece of advice from your experience that you could share with the rest of the members. So I will start first. Lanhu, please, your vision on these things.
Starting with me for this round. Regarding your question, maybe I need to first share with you China's experience so that we could have a better understanding the possible suggestions I would like to put with the colleagues here. China Customs has been actively implementing the WCO e-commerce package, and we've been adopting an approach of innovative, inclusive, prudent, and collaborative. First, we make the most of technologies to actively adapt to the features and needs of cross-border e-commerce. Taking the advantage of traceability of cross-border e-commerce, we've been exploring new concepts and methods to reform our customs control. We've developed a national cross-border e-commerce management platform with which we have achieved real-time data interconnectivity with the stakeholders. Data of order, payment, and logistics are transmitted by relevant enterprises to the customs in real time and verified against one another, and also with the declaration for customs clearance on this platform. And with such a verification process, we also make the most of the variety of data for our customs risk analysis so that we can focus our limited resources to the high risks and facilitate the rest. And apart from that, we've also developed corresponding supervision, corresponding control codes and relevant customs procedures in line with the features of different cross-border e-commerce transactions, and to ensure customs control and also duty collection. Those targeted measures also help to ensure effective customs statistics of cross-border e-commerce. You can have a general picture of a specific type of cross-border e-commerce transactions, and also to have a rich data to help boost customs risk analysis. And also we work with the philosophy of shared responsibility and co-management in an effort to promote a healthy and sustainable development of cross-border e-commerce. We strengthen cross-sectoral cooperation and information exchange among government agencies, jointly combating illegal trade while introducing relevant facilitation measures. For example, we share information with the People's Bank of China and other management agencies to conduct joint risk analysis and control. We conduct united verification on those enterprises suspected of transmitting false data and impose united sanctions on violations. We are also keen on to strengthen government and business cooperation. The rights and obligations of cross-border e-commerce operators are clearly depicted in the management system. Risk management control is conducted in advance as the business operation stage. We don't wait until they come to customs for customs clearance. The requirements for compliance are required to install in the daily operation system of the business, and they are asked to share data with customs to help to support customs risk control. We've also extended the policy, the concept of AUO to cross-border e-commerce. So all these measures are to encourage business to take part in co-management so that we can strike a balance between facilitation and compliance. So based on those experience of China customs, I would like to suggest, if for my colleagues, that first to establish a kind of legal working mechanism and focusing on major players. Well, it is suggested to strengthen national level design and also establish an institutional information exchange mechanism among government agencies to have a kind of policy synergy to better adapt to the needs and features of cross-border e-commerce. And also, it is suggested to focus your limited resources to business operators in the chain of cross-border e-commerce rather than to the wide range of consumers, specifying clearly their rights and obligations in your management system. And also, the heart of the focus would be the cross-border e-commerce platform operators, because they know their partners, the vendors, the logistics, the payment enterprises. So focus your limited resources to key players. And also following these features of new technologies and cross-border e-commerce, we can establish a kind of comprehensive management system, integrating from the very stage of storage and logistics to customs inspection, duty collection, and to inspection and customs release. So try to enhancing pre-arrival risk analysis and on-arrival verification, and after and post-clearance differentiated management. Well, second suggestion I would like to raise here for my colleague is to take full advantage of big data to strengthen risk management. Well, internet has spurred big data. So capitalizing on the electronic nature of cross-border e-commerce, we can establish an information exchange system with the stakeholders along the chain to achieve data interconnectivity and to implement integrated and synchronous risk analysis and control. It is further suggested to establish a cross-border e-commerce statistics system. I think that is very important, sorry, at least from the experience of China customs. It helps you to have a general picture of cross-border e-commerce and also helps you to have a rich pool of data to either for a risk analysis and also either for your future innovative ideas and reform of customs control in this new business mode. Last but not least, I would like to propose you to take an innovative, inclusive, prudent, and collaborative approach. From China customs experience, this is very, very important. Drastic development of cross-border e-commerce is the overriding trend and the challenge that we customs have to face. But what approach you take is very important in your appropriate response to such a challenge. So with such an approach of being innovative, prudent and collaborative and inclusiveness, you could do the customs bit to amplify the positive role of cross-border e-commerce in the recovery of economy in the post-pandemic era. Thank you, Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lan, for your piece of advice. Definitely innovation, risk management is very, very valuable and key in the correct implementation. For this round of questions, maybe the second speaker could provide the views from CBP. John, maybe what has been the approach of the US CBP and what would be the piece of advice to other members in the implementation of e-commerce standards? Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Ricardo. So the number one piece of advice that I would give on behalf of Customs and Border Protection to customs administrations seeking to, modernize and reform their e-commerce administration and processes is you need to work with the private sector. This has been CBP's kind of practice for many, many years, and e-commerce was no exception. So in kind of at the end of 2018 and into 2019, we stood up an e-commerce task force that included many, many different parties that play a role in international trade with e-commerce, to include the platforms, all of the big recognizable names that you know, all of the express consignment companies, custom house brokers, freight forwarders, importers, et cetera. Pretty much all of the stakeholders possible in this area. And we got them together to discuss what is the sensible way forward and what works in real life and real business in terms of data elements and processes. And we found it to be very, very helpful. And that helped us to launch the 2 pilots that we've been running for e-commerce since 2019. And that is our Type 86 pilot and our Section 321 data pilot. Don't be overly concerned about those numbers. They essentially pertain to different statutes and entry types that we have. But easy way to explain the 2 pilots is the first one, the Type 86, somewhat mirrors our current entry process, just in terms of the way that trade community files information in our automated system, which is called the Automated Commercial Environment. The Type 321 data pilot, the second one, specifically works with platforms. The large e-commerce platforms that we all are familiar with and many of us use on a daily basis. These are entities that, at least in the United States, we do not regulate right now. That may change in the future, but currently we don't regulate them. So they were helping us on a voluntary basis. And the results were very, very informative. Since its inception, we've now processed 465 million shipments through these pilots. The majority were through the Type 86 pilot, almost 75% of them actually, 305 million. And then we had 160 million shipments. This is roughly to date in our 321 data pilot. And so really conducting a pilot, testing something out before you make it permanent regulations, we find is very, very effective. You work out all the problems. You are able to learn, get best practices, and then you will move into a permanent state. And that's what we actually are working on now. We're taking all the lessons learned from our 2 pilots, and we are writing a permanent regulation that will define how we get advanced information on small packages. But the information that we've been getting has been nothing short of phenomenal for our officers on the ground. We get pictures of what's in the parcels, actual photographs. We have website links, including the price of the good, which is really great to get. We get shipper name and buyer name in the United States. Just a wealth of information that is able to help our officers better inform risk management, to decide what they want to look at and the shipments that they want to expedite. And of course, we really want to expedite and facilitate those compliant shipments that keep our economy moving and keep everything going strong. But we fully intend to use the lessons learned in these pilots as part of the WCO's case study compendium. We find that what we're learning, I think, could be very, very helpful for customs administrations around the world, especially those that have not done much yet with e-commerce and changing the way they get information and how they regulate this very, very busy space. So again, I think the main takeaway I would advise is work with your private sector, and I think you have a better outcome than if you do not. And I will turn it back to you, Ricardo.
Thank you, John. Definitely partnership and collaboration with private sector it's also a key element, also highlighted in the principles of the e-commerce framework of standards for WCO. So thanks a lot for your inputs. Now, Sabine, from the EU perspective, what are the experience and the advice that you could provide, the partnerships that you've worked with and so on? Thank you, Sabine. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ricardo. I think, well, what I'm going to say is very much in line with what my co-panelists have said and what I said in my introduction. I think in the EU we have been piloting with advanced information, and there we have, especially for small consignments, we have started with a reduced data set in order to make it easier for people to comply with that. That is applicable already now to express carriers, and we'll have that applicable also now since the 15th of March for postal operators. So definitely advanced information, so pre-clearance information, advanced information is crucial in order to help us better target our risk management and to be more efficient in our risk management. Now, in addition to that, of course, I think we also need to make sure and to help operators to facilitate compliance. And this is what we're trying to do with the one-stop shop, import one-stop shop that we are setting up for the VAT in small consignments, where platforms and marketplaces can register so that they can actually anticipate the compliance of the VAT payments already in advance, so that customs clearance can go very quickly once there's a signal that the duties have been and VAT has been paid. So I think giving platforms and marketplaces and operators the possibility to be voluntary compliant and to show their voluntary compliance, I think will also increase and improve our way to do with risk management. My third point would be about, of course, about the need for information exchange with and amongst government agencies. I think from our point of view, it's certainly true between the customs and the tax administration, but maybe also in the context of the pandemic, what we have seen is that it's very crucial also to have a strong collaboration with market surveillance authorities and also with the health authorities. So I think everything that goes into establishment also of single windows, which is what this is actually about, is very useful also in the context of e-commerce. And then maybe if I may highlight just one last point, which I also think is crucial and has come up also in the contributions from my fellow panelists, is take advantage of the data that we have and advantage of big data and of technology inspection, non-intrusive inspection technology that we could use in order to better screen, quicker screen these kind of small parcels. I must say, however, that at some point in time, we need to make the jump. Every customs administration needs to make the jump between what is the risk analysis, the data, and then what is in the package itself and the true controls. So at some point, we need to have this link between the data and the non-physical elements and the physical elements of control. I mean, sometimes we see only for counterfeit goods. We will only see if we open the parcel. So let's not get too enthusiastic about that we can completely avoid the human element, that we can completely avoid physical controls. There needs to be also an element of physical controls in order to then feedback to our risk management, improve our risk management, also look into the persons behind the transactions, and maybe that information is also something that we would want to have, that we want to share amongst the customs administrations around the world, that we have a better understanding about who are our traders, are they trustworthy traders, and in that sense, the authorized economic program is a very fundamental tool, I think, also in the e-commerce environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabine. Indeed, well, all of you have been talking about risk management, And indeed, you just mentioned the AEO concept, which is part of a recent note that was published by the Secretariat and acknowledged last week by Council. And I think that members and Secretariat had been able to accommodate within the new SAFE review, the SAFE 2021, the concept of e-commerce as well. So again, this interlinkage of our tools is something in which the comprehensive approach, you mentioned single window as well, is based on. So it's we have a lot to do still to expand the e-commerce concept to other tools, and I think this is the right way to approach it in a comprehensive manner. Now I've seen several questions in the chat. So before I could continue making other questions, but I'll take some in the chat so that we can have some time for this. And I see, for instance, one. Maybe John, you could be this time for this round, the first one to address this question. How do we ensure e-commerce exporters classify their goods correctly? How do we ensure de minimis does not hide true data, true trade data and commodity flow trends across borders? And how do we encourage de minimis harmonization for e-commerce across the globe? It looks like 3 questions in one. John, your view on this.
Those are excellent questions, and if we had all the answers to those, we would certainly be miles ahead in this battle. I think, you know, to all 3 of them, it's a matter of requiring this data to be sent, you know, prior to the shipment arriving in your country of origin. So your Customs Administration has got to be able to receive any of these elements, whether it's harmonized tariff schedule number, whether it is description of the goods, other information in advance. And of course, the veracity of that information is only as good as the, you know, the entity that's providing it. You know, classifying a good in the harmonized tariff schedule, as we as customs officers know, is not something that somebody who does not have experience in it can do effectively. Essentially, that means more attention needs to be placed on it, and likely a little bit more cost needs to be placed on it if we're going to have, for instance, a licensed custom house broker be involved, someone who really knows how to classify merchandise correctly. But again, these are things that I think can be overcome, but the fundamental thing to get information in advance is to work it out, as I mentioned earlier, test it with your private sector counterparts. What are they able to provide? How can we get the platforms involved to provide this information? And that way you have a better idea of what exactly is in that parcel that has arrived at your airport and that your customs officers may or may not want to look at. I think Sabine very correctly said that it's never always going to be completely automated. Our customs officers still need to be there on the ground using their knowledge, their officer intuition, and combining that professional knowledge with what we're seeing on the automated system will help us get around that. But I think we need to start to look at what the data is and requiring it in advance for our administrations to get our arms around this problem set. But it's a very great and fundamental question.
Thank you, John. Indeed, we still need to progress and try to answer these questions with much more of the piloting that all of you are describing and addressing currently. There are 2 very concrete questions addressed to you, Sabine. Maybe you would like to address them. The first one, Jonathan Coe says, if I paid VAT under the new EU VAT rules and then returned to overseas online supplier, can and how do I claim refund of VAT? And the second one is about the customs declaration. About is it sent electronically to customs by importers as well? So these are 2 very concrete questions that you might be able to address. Thank you, Sabine.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for these questions. I think they're linked to our new rules that will apply as of the 1st of July, in particular for the new VAT rules. And of course, you can claim a refund of the VAT that you have paid. You have to reclaim it from the marketplace or the online supplier if the import one-stop shop is used, and if not, you have to claim it back from the customs or the tax administration, depending on the member state. So the answer to that is yes, you can get it. You're entitled to claim it back, and hopefully from the marketplace, the online supplier that is registered in the one-stop shop. I think currently the major marketplaces are already, or some of the major marketplaces are already registered in a one-stop shop. In particular, I think Amazon and others have registered. So that is really should be a very straightforward procedure. For the second question, I understand that it's well. When I said we are requiring a customs declaration also for small consignments, yes, it is an electronic declaration. Now, this has to be submitted either by the importer, so that can be the consumer of the EU, or most frequently, and that's how it's done in the majority of cases. This is going to be done by the carrier, so the postal operator or the express carrier, who then acts on behalf of the importer, on behalf of the consumer in the EU. I hope that that answered the questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it was very clear response. Thanks, Sabine, for this. And now another question from the chat, and this I will address to Lan. Lan, you talked about using big data on the risk analysis, risk management. So, of course, for effective risk management, it says the question, it is necessary to analyze the information received and accumulated not only by customs services, but also by other interested parties, such as other agencies, postal operators, internet trading platforms, among others. In this regard, please, could you tell us with which interested parties has your administration concluded agreements or exchange of information? Thank you.
And thank you, and also thank the audience for the question. As I just briefed, I think what is special and also very effective about China Customs controlling system with regard to cross-border e-commerce is our national cross-border e-commerce management system. You see, this system, this platform is interconnected with the cross-border e-commerce platform. You see, the cross-border e-commerce operator platform. So, for example, maybe the Alibaba. You see, their platform is connected to the customs management platform. So that's why I just introduced to you their information and data is transmitted and shared with the customs. So we know all the information. We know the information of payment, of order, and logistics. And also, this customs management platform is also assisted with our e-port. You see, with e-port, the kind of single window, e-port, on this e-port, we have the users are the relevant government agencies and also the stakeholders along the chain of trade. So, for example, the bank, the taxation, and trade, so they are registered in the e-port system. So with the supporting one another by these platforms and systems, we achieve a strong collaborative cooperation and sharing of information with relevant government agencies and as well as enterprises along the chain of cross-border e-commerce. That's why I suggested to my colleagues here to have a strong national level design, to have a national level cooperative working mechanism among all the stakeholders, including the government, as well as the enterprises. So this is very important. Of course, as my colleague from US and EU has just said, the expertise of customs officers is also very important. But as this time of quick development of technology, it is strongly suggested to make full usage of technology so that customs expertise could be in a plus. So with the support of technology and kind of have a kind of you see interconnectivity among all the systems. So when you first design your management systems of the cross-border e-commerce. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Lan. And again, time flies. It's been a great panel, a great session. I want to thank you for your contributions to the three of you. And I think we found some common elements. Of course, risk management is in the core part of customs administration's doing. I think we all talk about enhancing our risk management, and you have made it very clear today. I think we can say as well that customs administrations have a very important role and powers that exist nowhere else in government. Customs administrations have the authority to inspect cargo and goods entering or leaving a customs territory, of course, and customs can also expedite entry, refuse entry or exit, and allow a re-export and refund of duties and taxes. Customs administrations can, based on appropriate legislation, require information about the goods to be provided electronically in advance by the various e-commerce stakeholders. And last but not least, customs has an important role in revenue collection. Given the unique authorities and oversight, customs can and should play a central role in the cross-border management of e-commerce, leveraging existing conventions, instruments, and tools. Customs should work with other relevant government agencies and e-commerce stakeholders to address any gaps in the existing legislation and processes. I think all of these have been experiences and lessons learned that today our panelists have shared. And I would like to highlight as well that the WCO e-commerce framework of standards draws on the collective experience and knowledge of experts from customs, other government agencies, industry, academia, and civil society, and it's in keeping with the mandate of the World Customs Organization to contribute to the standardization and harmonization of border regulatory processes. The WCO is also offering capacity building support to its members for implementing the framework in a coordinated and harmonized manner. And trade facilitation and a truly paperless customs environment will constitute a critical building block for further growth of e-commerce. So we all expect e-commerce to keep growing, definitely. I can't thank enough our distinguished speakers today, Sabine, Lan, John. The three of you have been excellent today. I've been very honored, and it's been my privilege to facilitate this panel session today. And again, thank you very much for making this event much more interesting with your views, with your inputs, and we look forward to hearing from you more and more here in WCO. A big greetings from here to all of you, and please stay safe. Now, I give the floor back to our Master of Ceremony, Brendan O'Hearn. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary General, for your remarks and for moderating a panel that brought together three distinguished speakers from the Americas, Europe, and Asia. Let me also thank our speakers, Ms. Hensler, Ms. Hu, my good friend and former colleague, Mr. Leonard. Thank you all. Our last session for today will focus on challenges and opportunities of adapting to new business models in e-commerce, and cooperation between e-commerce stakeholders and customs, and the possibility of expanding the concept of AEO to e-commerce operators. In this session, we will hear from both customs and the private sector. We will also be challenged to stretch our minds and our bodies. Providing a scene setter and moderating this session will be Mr. Genshin Hideaki, Deputy Director General of Japan Customs. Mr. Genshin, dozo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ohan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Hideaki Genshin, Japan Customs. It is my great pleasure and honor to moderate this session 3 at the WCO's second cross-border e-commerce conference 2021. And I would like to express my sincere thanks to the World Customs Organization and distinguished speakers. The current priority of Japan Customs is to contribute to the global efforts for recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic by utilizing the technologies and data in order to adequately respond and support to the rapidly increasing transactions in e-commerce, which is the driving force of the global economy under COVID-19. In Japan, like other countries, customs has witnessed the tremendous increase, as over 50% increase in air cargoes in 2020. We consider this trend will continue to grow. Fortunate or unfortunate, this surge of small parcels arriving to our countries cast several fundamental questions to the traditional customs procedures and controls. In particular, do current elements for import declaration cover enough information? Do traditional stakeholders like express carriers and postal operators have enough information on real importers or consignees and actual price paid, particularly under emerging business case in e-commerce, including fulfillment centers? In order to find futuristic solutions beyond the traditional customs procedures, customs and e-commerce stakeholders should work and discuss together to find how to share the responsibilities in facilitating and securing global e-commerce supply chains by reinforcing collaboration. Next slide, please. Yes. In this context, this session 3 will focus on challenges and opportunities of adapting to new business models in e-commerce, including fulfillment center and cooperation between e-commerce stakeholders and customs, and possibility of expanding the concept of AEO to e-commerce operators with distinguished speakers from the private sector and customs, namely Mr. Travis Skinner, Senior Manager on Customs and Trade at Amazon, and Mr. Praveen Sashi, Senior Director of DHL Express, Mr. Christian van der Warren, Director General of the Belgian Customs, and Ms. Emma Bada Al-Swadi, Director of Dubai Customs. Next page, please. Yes. To start this session, let me share some observations on this issue. I'd like to show you a new business model with fulfillment centers. Fulfillment center plays an important role to connect small and medium-sized sellers to international trade and facilitate e-commerce trade by providing technology-driven logistics and storage services. Next page, please. On the other hand, customs needs to consider the impact on this evolving business model to the traditional customs procedure model. Here are some features of one of the fulfillment center models. Importation may occur before the storage of cargoes in fulfillment centers and actual sales. sales would occur and actual price would be set after importation. And most parties in the e-commerce supply chain are not involved and not visible in traditional customs procedures. In order for global economy to realize sound economic growth by securing safe supply chain, we need to make efforts to tackle this situation, especially lack of or insufficient information for risk analysis, such as real importers or consumers, real customs value, description of goods, etc. To tackle these challenges, it would be necessary for customs to receive sufficient data and or information for risk analysis. Next, please. Additional information for customs must play a crucial role to realize a sound global supply chain. In this regard, the key solutions could be to reinforce the cooperation with e-commerce stakeholders and to utilize information and data available within the e-commerce supply chain. In order to reinforce the cooperation, I'd like to point out some challenges, such as establishing mutual trust between customs and the stakeholders is necessary for sound global supply chain. But how can we establish cooperation with stakeholders who are not engaged in customs procedures? Do the stakeholders need any benefits from customs? How can we establish cooperation with stakeholders in abroad? In any ways, customs and stakeholders needs to have common understanding on current circumstances and discuss how to address them. Next page, please. As Standard 6 of e-commerce framework of standards stipulates, and the WCO Secretariat note provides some details, expanding AO to e-commerce stakeholders could be one solution, but then we need to diligently consider the following points. How to apply AO to micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises vendors located in foreign countries. How to communicate with or validate e-marketplaces located in foreign countries. Fulfillment centers are not conducting customs procedures. What can they do to realize sound global supply chain and to ensure security and safety? Next, please. As for data exchange with e-commerce stakeholders, key considerations could be what would be the benefits for e-commerce stakeholders? Can e-commerce stakeholders provide payment data to customs? How to communicate and share data with e-marketplaces located in foreign countries? Can fulfillment center, who is not conducting customs procedures, provide necessary information to customs on a voluntary basis, like in the case of the US pilot? If relevant parties cannot provide the necessary information to customs on a voluntary basis, would customs have to consider introducing new regulations to tackle the loophole of existing regulations? How to apply data pipeline concept to share the responsibility to submit data to customs? Moving ahead, I believe sharing experiences and exchange of opinions with all relevant parties are essential, and I'm very sure that the distinguished speakers with the futuristic insights and the spirit to lead the changes to adapt to the new environment, will provide practical but futuristic solutions. That's all from me. Thank you very much. Now we will invite our distinguished speakers for the presentations. For this session, we have 4 speakers from the private sector and customs administrations as Mr. Christian van der Warren, Director General of Belgian Customs, Mr. Travis Skinner, Senior Manager Public Policy, Amazon, Ms. Emma Vada Al-Swadi, Director for Customs Violation Department, Authorized Economic Operator Program, Dubai Customs, and Mr. Praveen Sashi, Regional Head of Digitalization, MENA, DHL Express UAE. I would like to go to our first panelist in session 3. Mr. Christian van der Warren, Director General, Belgian Customs. Since the beginning of his mandate, he has made e-commerce one of his priorities. He set up a working group to develop a uniform solution for Belgium for handling e-commerce shipments. Mr. van der Warren, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the floor today. I have one lesson to teach to you today. This lesson has been taken from the Roman poet Juvenalis, mens sana in corpore sano, which is Latin for a sound mind in a sound body. Both should be in harmony with each other. For this reason, we will start with the body. Please do what I do. For the gentlemen, yes. For the gentlemen, take off your tie. Open the button. Close your eyes and look to the dark. Remember to get up, move your ass. You can open your eyes now and look to me. Take your arm like this, and then 5 times you turn it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like so. And now we are going to do the same thing with the other arm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice. Now, stretch your arms like I will do this. Bring your arms above your head and stretch like I do. Bring back your arms. And now repeat what I do. With your right hand you go to the left. And then you go to the right. And then you go to the left. And then you go to the right. And then you go to the left. And then you go to the right. Marvelous. Your shoulders. Move them. as I do. Inside out. Inside out. Inside out. Inside out. Inside out. And the way around. Outside in. Outside in. Outside in. Outside in. Outside in. And once again, outside in. And now, finally, you need to get up, you need to bow and cross your ankles and hold the ankles for 10 seconds. Congratulations, you have done it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was my speech. Bye-bye. Now, let's go to the mind. When I look to e-commerce and customs today, I see a mind and body that are not in harmony with each other. Today, goods move all over the world. Customs authorities receive a declaration. On the basis of that declaration, customs authorities launch a risk analysis. And on the basis of the risk analysis, they select and inspect a very small number of goods. Less than 1% in Belgium. And we are nationally organized. Now, are we doing a good job? Yes, because in Belgium we seized 65 tons of cocaine last year. Can have a great party with this. But cocaine consumption is still growing in Europe. Market prices remain untouched. Yes, we do a good job, because we stop a lot of counterfeit goods entering Europe, but Europe is continuous, be floated by counterfeit goods. Yes, we stop endangered species, but Europe is still a flourishing marketplace for this kind of commerce. So are we doing a great job? The answer is no. Because commerce, and especially e-commerce, and customs are not in harmony with each other. The question now is, how can we bring e-commerce and customs in harmony with each other? Digitalization and technology, it has been mentioned before. By matching both elements, we will bring e-commerce and customs in harmony. Digitalization will allow the check of data on a continuous basis. Data can be collected from different sources and will allow customs authorities to cross-check data real time. If data match with each other, then there is no problem. If data do not match, then inspection of goods and transaction is required. The sources of data available on the digital highways, you see them on the slide, are governmental sources, the country of export authorities and customs, the country of import authorities, customs, the idea your export is my import. You get connection. Private sources, exporter goods accounting, the exporter has his accounting and is linked to the internet. Logistic hub community systems, imports and airports have, it has been mentioned by our colleagues from China, have a lot of information available. Import goods accounting system, companies importing the good also are connected to the end. And especially, of course, we need to connect with the e-commerce platforms. And then you have the free internet sources. If we can aggregate all this information, in an ideal world, no customs declaration is required anymore. Digitalization That's key, but technology also. Scan technology allows and will allow to check the physical goods. We have digital highways, to verify, we check the digital information, but to be sure that illegal goods are not entering the country, we need to check physically. At strategic points in the logistic chain, goods should be checked by technology to identify import and export of illegal goods. Huge data available on the highways, the digital highways. Huge data coming from checks on the logistic chain from technology. When you bring them together, you need artificial intelligence. This will allow customs authorities to check the data from the digital highways with the scans of goods, and this on a continuous basis. In case of anomalies, goods are stopped and submitted to customs authorities for a physical or non-physical check. Question, is this easy to achieve? Technology and digitalization are not the real problem. Legislation is required to be adapted. Like has been mentioned by Hidaki, customs legislation should be adopted. The customs post-Second World War legislation is not appropriate anymore for e-commerce. However, it's not easy. It's not easy to implement this. And I see three main areas where the difficulties are. The first element being cybersecurity. How to avoid disturbance of the highways from cyber attacks. First. Secondly, privacy issue. How to avoid that rules in relation to privacy are not violated. And third, the most important, is the trust. Do we have enough trust in each other to set this in place? And this is something which I address to the customs authorities, but this is also a question I raise to our governments. What is the conclusion? Provided customs authorities get information from different sources of the digital highways and in e-commerce the platforms, and they have access to technology allowing them to check the data of the digital highway with what's real as good in the package, in the shipping, then customs authorities can establish continuous surveillance, can establish continuous auditing. And if this is the case, then e-commerce and customs will be in harmony with each other. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Chair, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van der Warren, for your futuristic and inspiring presentation, starting with excellent yoga exercises. We will take questions after we hear the presentations of all panelists. Despite that, I would like to encourage our participants to start posting your questions in advance in the chat box of the Zoom platform. Please indicate clearly to which panelist the question is directed. Next is a joint presentation for 15 minutes by Dubai Customs and DHL. Ms. Iman Badr Al-Swaidi is Director for Customs Valuation Department, Authorized Economic Operator Program, Dubai Customs, with over 20 years of experience, including Customs Declaration Management and Authorized Economic Operator. And Mr. Praveen Sashi is Regional Head of Digitalization MENA and holds additional responsibilities as Senior Director of IT and Logistics at DHL Express. Ms. Al-Swaidi and Mr. Sashi, you have the floor.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. I thank WCO for this opportunity to present Dubai Customs' view on expanding the concept of AO and our recent experience into adapting to e-commerce. During the second part of this presentation, our private sector partner, DHL, will be sharing their perspective on this matter. So let's start with the new trade reality. As you are aware, the international trade landscape has changed with the growth of e-commerce and micro, small, and medium enterprises. We are looking at a fast evolving trade environment that is getting increasingly complex. Rise of new operators with varying resource capacities, business models, and roles adds to the challenge of handling small value, high volume packages.
Ms. Emmond, excuse me to interrupt. Could you put your presentation in full screen mode, please?
It is in the full screen.
It is not on our end.
Yeah.
It is moving now to the second screen, to the second slide indeed, but it is not in full screen. Maybe we should repeat the action. So could you please stop sharing? Yes, please click on that icon there.
Yeah, I stopped sharing.
Okay, and restart the procedure. So the green button, the share screen button at the bottom, and then on the new page, the blue share button.
Yeah.
Great, and now click on the full screen button there.
Is it okay now?
No, it is not going to a full screen. Is it on your end?
Yeah, it is.
Do you have multiple screens? It is on full screen on a secondary screen, maybe?
I don't know. I'm not able. Do you have it from your end in WCO?
Let me have a look in our folders.
Maybe, I don't know. If Praveen, you can...
Yes, we do have it.
Yeah, okay. So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Please say next slide whenever we need to move to the next slide.
Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so we were talking about the new trade reality. The international trade landscape has changed with the growth of e-commerce and micro, small, and medium enterprises. We are looking at a fast evolving trade environment that is getting increasingly complex. Rise of new operators with varying resource capacities, models, and role adds to the challenge of handling small value, high volume packages. I find this quote very interesting from Jean-Paul from L'Oréal. E-commerce isn't the cherry on the cake, it's the new cake. So e-commerce must be understood and accepted as a whole to manage it, rather than extend traditional customs approaches. A holistic and harmonized customs approach is needed to balance the growth of new trade channels against the associated border risk. AU program has the potential to address this, and we will explore how in the next slide. Next, please. Yeah, expanding AO to e-commerce. So AO program must be able to respond and adapt quickly to the growth of e-commerce. As more e-commerce operators enter the supply chain, onboarding them as AOs becomes essential to secure and facilitate trade. E-commerce operators vary in their nature of business, operating models, and resource capabilities. This requires customs to handle them differently and smartly. AO program can be flexible to accommodate these operators with an in-depth understanding of their operations and needs. AO program could expand in the areas of authorization, post-certification monitoring, benefit packages, and mutual recognition agreements. To start with, authorization. Existing criteria and process used for authorizing AOs may not apply as such for all e-commerce operators. MSMEs might be lacking in financial and compliance scores or maturity of process. New e-commerce operators like marketplaces, platforms may not have direct interaction with customers, but plays a critical role in the supply chain. Hence, specialized criteria might be required for authorizing e-commerce operators as AEO. The authorization criteria could then be looked into to determine how they could be adjusted, relaxed, or made conditional to suit e-commerce without compromising on security. For example, We can have wider acceptance range for financial stability, or acceptance of the company evolving operations maturity level. Or we can explore compliance and security requirements for unique operator types like marketplace and platforms. Next, the monitoring or post-certification monitoring. Of course, traditional methods of monitoring and controlling may not apply to this new generation operators. For example, recertification cycle might have to be more frequent depending on the risk factors. Operators may have to be worked with closely to ensure compliance to regulatory requirements. Now let's move to benefits package. A suitable and comprehensive benefit package for promoting e-commerce trade must be designed working closely with the concerned stakeholders. For example, simplified procedures, more simplified procedures, reduced charge, consolidated declaration, rebate systems, and the likes. Of course, such benefits may require revision of existing policies or introduction of new policies. Lastly, mutual recognition agreement. New operator types such as vendors, e-commerce platforms, marketplace, fulfillment centers, postal operators must be identified and clearly defined. Global acceptance of these trusted e-commerce operators across all AE program is important to benefit from MRAs. Possibilities within MRAs must be explored to recognize and provide benefits to each other's e-commerce operators. Next, please. So how does this AO e-commerce model work as we see it? E-commerce from a customs perspective can be considered high risk while equally important for trade and growth. Timely, accurate, and secure data exchange between customs and traders and other stakeholders is necessary for further securing and facilitating the e-commerce supply chain. Partnership, technology, and agility must be at the core of an AO model integrating e-commerce. So partnership, the core essence of AO program. It must be further reinforced across the business community. More insight and awareness must be given to traders. Most transparency and exchange with customers. Efforts must be spent to address any reluctance or concern that traders might have around this. Not only traders, I mean the operators of the platforms or the platforms. These steps help ensure the readiness and participation. In technology, authentic data from the source must be available to relevant stakeholders in advance of the flow. Integration with required stakeholders must be established to facilitate trusted data sharing between parties. Customs and regulatory authorities are dependent on accurate, timely data to ease border restrictions and enable the faster movement of goods. For example, technologies like blockchain enable trade parties to share data with each other in a trusted, timely manner. And artificial intelligence-powered risk assessment speeds up customs. The key here would be to make it transparent, useful, and affordable for the e-commerce stakeholders to provide the required data. Finally, agility. The rapid growth of e-commerce puts customs on their toes, continuously monitoring trends and revising strategies and solutions accordingly. With new opportunities comes new challenge. Looking at the big picture, we might not be able to prevent all customs offenses from happening, but we can for sure prevent it from repeating. Our ability to respond in an agile manner is key, being able to make quick changes as required. Next, please. So the Dubai cross-border e-commerce platform, how does it work? Dubai Customs developed an innovative e-commerce platform to integrate and automate operations between customs, free zones, logistics, and courier companies. It was the first of its kind in the region, utilizing blockchain as the core technology. The initiative was launched in 2020 and is currently in the pilot phase, partnering with AO certified e-commerce stakeholders. The platform addressed B2B and B2C models of business, and the relevant policies were introduced to facilitate it. Some benefits of the platform include automated processes, paperless and reduced documentation, reduced charges, conditional exemptions on duty and service charge, improved risk management, and facilitated good risk. Next, please. So our partnership. We have had a long-standing relationship with our private sector partner, DHL. DHL was one of the first few companies that were AO certified in the United Arab Emirates. They have worked alongside with Dubai Customs over the years, piloted multiple initiatives. The most recent of our collaboration is the Dubai cross-border e-commerce platform. I now pass it over to Mr. Praveen from DHL to share their experience and perspective. Thank you.
Can I share the screen? I also need to be unmuted.
Yes, sir, you are unmuted. You want...
Thank you.
Let me stop sharing over here.
You can see the screen, yeah?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening again. Thanks, WCO, for the opportunity to participate and speak on this important topic. As we have heard today, we've been witnessing two major trends in recent years, and both accelerated by this pandemic: rise in cross-border e-commerce and digitalization. International trade, and cross-border e-commerce in particular, is not without its share of challenges, as we've heard. In the next 5 minutes, I'll share our experience on how we leverage digitalization, address some of these challenges, while also creating an enabling environment built on collaboration, transparency, and trust between the key stakeholders in this ecosystem. In the Middle East, one of the fastest growing regions in e-commerce, growth being driven by global companies looking to expand into regional markets, and equally local companies going international, and also traditional retailers increasingly switching to digital channels. On the surface, cross-border e-commerce looks rather easy. One can set up an online shop overnight, partner with a logistics company, and gain instant access to an international market. However, cross-border e-commerce is quite complex from a logistics and customs standpoint. As we heard today, unlike B2B, which traditional supply chains and clearance models are built on to support, cross-border e-commerce involves high and often unpredictable volumes. It is characterized by a high number of returns and multiple border crossings of goods, often leading to multiple duties, VAT, and other charges. There are risks like unknown consignee shipper, and still more challenges like undervaluation, counterfeit goods, and so forth. Risk management and compliance in such an environment becomes a daunting task both for e-commerce companies, both for the logistics companies and customs, creating inefficiencies, need for additional resources, and increasing the paper trail, as it's been spoken about. For e-commerce merchants as well, such an environment appears rather complex for business with significant costs and trade barriers. Despite challenges, e-commerce continues to grow because of the convenience and the choice it offers consumers. Increased online shopping also drives growth for the economy. Therefore, it becomes important for all of us to adapt to the new realities of cross-border e-commerce. Now, with this in mind, Dubai Customs and DHL partnered on an innovative pilot project of creating a collaborative, transparent, and secure environment to facilitate cross-border e-commerce. This solution was enabled by blockchain, as the technology enables transparency, traceability, and auditability. That is, it creates an immutable single source of truth that is vital to build trust. Now, there are three main players involved, as you can see in the picture. There's an online buyer who is usually based in another country. There's an online seller based in the country, in UAE, for example. And of course, you have DHL as a logistics provider, and of course, Dubai Customs for the cross-border clearance. The e-com platform, as you can see in the picture, what it does is basically integrates all these players on a shared trust network. All the transactional data is captured from the source and accessible on the platform in near real time. Thus, it brings an improved level of transparency, traceability, and timely availability of data that can be utilized to simplify and facilitate cross-border processes. The business rules, risk assessment, and compliance check of legitimate transactions are enforced via smart contracts on the blockchain platform. As illustrated in the picture, data on the e-commerce platform is captured directly from the source. Starting at the moment an online buyer has purchased a product online and made payment for it, this proof of purchase is captured on the platform, which improves credibility of data, which is invaluable for rapid clearance, duty and VAT calculations, and so forth. Later, when the product is picked up by DHL for cross-border shipping, customs clearance, and delivery to the buyer, all these events and data are tracked on the platform. Timely availability of accurate and complete data helps automate customs clearance without requiring manual intervention or paperwork. Now, this is helpful, especially when dealing with high e-commerce volumes to achieve rapid clearances and also meet customer expectation for fast delivery of goods. On the platform, e-commerce shippers can be readily identified and e-commerce transactions fully traced. And this enables effective risk assessment and compliance from a customs standpoint. For example, legitimate e-commerce returns can be tracked on the platform, facilitating faster clearance, duty drawback, or even duty exemptions, which helps e-commerce merchants in Dubai. Additionally, it provides Dubai Customs more flexibility to explore new revenue collection models. I will not go into the details here, but to summarize, saying that this partnership initiative has created an enabling environment for e-commerce in Dubai through better collaboration, transparency, and trust, and has benefited all participants in the ecosystem: e-commerce merchants, logistics companies, customs, online shoppers, and general public. For e-commerce companies, the improved transparency and data quality helps to better demonstrate compliance and enjoy benefits. Customs has improved ability to effectively manage risk, compliance, and maintain efficiency while supporting a high-volume, rapid clearance environment. Also, regulatory changes and controls can be quickly managed on the platform as needed to facilitate trade. But a key point, perhaps, is that online shippers' expectations for increasingly fast deliveries can continue to be met, which is vital to sustain cross-border e-commerce. Logistics companies like DHL continue to play an important role as a trusted partner and enabler. We are ready to support and extend the solutions beyond borders globally. We believe such collaborative initiatives will help in creating an enabling environment for cross-border e-commerce, which, as we know, remains a major contributor to economic growth in these challenging times. Thank you.
And Mr. Asashi for sharing Dubai Customs and DHL's experience on expanding AO to e-commerce stakeholders to strengthen cooperation with e-commerce stakeholders. I agree that e-commerce is not the cherry on the cake, it's a new cake. So customers need to consider how to adapt to the new cake. Now I would like to move on to Q&A session. Before opening the floor, I would like to ask a question to the first panelist. Mr. Van der Wallen, do you have any idea on how to revise national legislation to support the exchange of information with other customs and e-commerce stakeholders located in other countries? Do you need bilateral or international agreements for this purpose? Or is it possible to realize it as voluntary cooperative framework? Mr. Van der Wallen, the floor is yours.
The ideal situation would be, of course, to have a framework established on an international level. I made references to the notion of your export is my import, and the platforms are organized on an international level. And this is not true for states, and that is one of the reasons of the mismatch between both. So the best thing to put in place would be an international framework. Of course, what should be the elements to be included and how to establish this in an international environment, it's once you go to a legal framework, it becomes difficult. In relation to the legislation, e-commerce and the way legislation for customs is put in place today, the legislation should be adapted. It should be made much more simpler if you come to, for instance, valuation of goods. The rules which we apply under the GATT framework are too complex for the e-commerce stuff. So there, I think a change in international regulation is requested. In relation to the technology and the obligation or the connection with the platforms, it is my opinion that legislation should be put in place, imposing that sets of data are put available to the customs authorities. So this is obligation to be put in place. The most important, that's why we have this conference today, is to sit together with the private sector. They have huge information, they have a lot of information, and what can they provide to us? Work with pilots, look to how member states, like we have seen in the United States or in China, are dealing with the big platforms, and what lessons can we learn from those member states. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van der Wallen. Now I move on to next questions. This is a question in the chat box. Let me read it. Is the AO program to benefit solely the e-commerce operator? That this includes the small consumer and or small business importer? How will this assist with faster delivery, particularly for a country where the majority of packages are small? The floor is yours, Ms. Al-Swadi.
Yeah, thank you. So the AO program has a list of benefits which are given for in general. So with the e-commerce platform that we are in the pilot phase now, we are gradually enrolling all types of this new business. So micro and MSMEs are also included. So they will be given based on their nature of work benefits measured to their which suits their requirements, tailored on their requirements. So they are, I think, in phase 3 of our e-commerce platform. So it's not, they were saying it's solely for e-commerce. No, AO, of course, is for all companies, but we have a special category now for SMEs. We started enrolling SMEs. We have 1 or 2 SMEs under our program at the moment. Benefits are general at the moment, but when they join the platform and they start using any arm in the platform, they will enjoy the benefits that are given or facilitation that are given to the e-commerce company. I hope my answer is enough.
Thank you very much, Ms. Al-Swadi. And dear participants, thank you very much indeed for many questions in the chat box. Unfortunately, due to the time constraints, the next question will be the last one. I found an interesting question in the chat box, which is addressed to Mr. Skinner. Yes. Considering the model applied by Amazon, especially its security scheme, it would be considered very positive that they advance in the AU qualification processes in the countries where they carry out international trade operations. There are many questions in the chat box that are not that I couldn't introduce to all the participants due to time constraints. So could you please answer the rest of the questions in the chat box. I would like to appreciate your cooperation to this global conference. Before closing the session, first of all, I highly appreciate all the speakers and the floor participants for your active discussions and contributions. To wrap up this session, I would like to state 3 points. Firstly, through the discussion, we confirmed that it is a common challenge for each country how to respond to the rapid increase of e-commerce, which is based on new business models. The key to address this challenge must be the development of mutual trust between customs and e-commerce stakeholders. I think the discussion on how customs can establish trust with e-commerce stakeholders will be deepened further in the WCO, taking into account different situation of each country. I expect that the WCO actively invite e-commerce stakeholders, such as e-marketplaces, to facilitate the mutual understandings on both emerging business models and customs procedures, which could bring us to intensive discussions in the WCO to find creative and win-win solutions for benefits of all. And secondly, with respect to the idea of expanding AU program to e-commerce stakeholders like platformers and fulfillment centers, some countries have been exploring this idea as an effective solution to ensure appropriate risk management for e-commerce cargo. I expect that a wide range of discussions will be proceeded with flexible minds, having the idea of expanding AEO as a useful solution. To address new challenges, I also expect the possibility of other options, considering different situation of each country and e-commerce business models. And lastly, I sincerely hope that today's discussion will be further developed and both customs and stakeholders will properly accommodate themselves to e-commerce environment to ensure and maintain sound global supply chain. Our distinguished speakers, thank you very much indeed once again. Now I hand over to our Master of Ceremony, Mr. Ohan. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director General Genshin, for your remarks and for moderating this panel discussion, and also for your recommendations. On behalf of all of us at the WCO, we would also like to thank our speakers, Director General van der Warren. A special thank you for challenging us both in mind and in body. And to another former colleague and good friend of mine, Mr. Skinner, and of course to our very close partners, Ms. Al-Sawadi and Mr. Sashi. Let me thank again all of our moderators today and speakers, and a special thanks to all of our participants. We greatly appreciated all of the questions that you submitted that ensured we had an interactive and dynamic conference. Please do join us for day 2 tomorrow at 1300 Brussels time. We have another exciting day with high-level speakers from international organizations, customs, the private sector, and even our own council chair, Mr. Al-Khalifa from Bahrain. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow. Good day from Brussels.